Welcome to Climate.edu, the podcast about climate change and higher education. I'm your host, Richard Sebastian. Combating climate change is big and complex, but the overarching goal can be distilled down to a fairly simple metric: 1.5 degrees Celsius. The planet is warming, and we need to keep the increase in global temperature to as close as 1.5 degrees as possible by limiting the amount of carbon that we release into the atmosphere. Now, we don't have a lot of time to do this, so an important question to ask is, what are the most effective actions or policies, technologies that the world should prioritize and invest in that will have the biggest impact in this narrow window of time we have? Maybe we should plant 1 billion trees or electrify all buildings and transport. No, the only way to do it is eliminate oil, coal, and gas and subsidize renewable energy. Nope, everyone has to stop eating meat. Or, carbon capture is going to save us. It's going to suck all the carbon out of the air. Maybe it's nuclear power, degrowth, depopulation, a combination. For the average person, this complexity of the global challenge and the lack of clarity on impactful solutions can be paralyzing and really disincentivize engagement. Enter En-ROADS, a free, easy-to-use online dashboard and modeling tool that is available for anyone to test out and explore various climate solutions, just like the ones I mentioned. Now, if you haven't checked it out before, it might be easy just to go to the En-ROADS dashboard on the Climate Interactive website. I'll link to it in the episode show notes, and you can see how it works. But basically, you move a series of sliders to say, I'm going to heavily subsidize renewable energy and building electrification. I'm going to heavily tax oil and gas. And then the dashboard responds by displaying the resulting global temperature increase or decrease by the year 2100. It also outputs a host of other economic, environmental, and equity impacts. Underneath the hood of En-ROADS is a powerful mix of the latest evidence-based climate data, a systems dynamics modeling engine, and a host of graphics and charts that visualize your specific set of climate solutions. En-ROADS was co-developed by a team at MIT's Sloan Sustainability Initiative and by today's guest, Andrew Jones, Executive Director of Climate Interactive. The project, I think, is a great example of how the research activity, intellectual heft, innovative culture, and educational mission of an institution like MIT can be effectively operationalized to meaningfully address climate change. The En-ROADS tool has been used with world leaders, with all kinds of decision makers at high-stakes climate talks, and Climate Interactive continues to provide free training to people like me to become climate ambassadors and use the En-ROADS tools in the workplace, in our communities, in schools, and on college campuses. Andrew Jones is also a research affiliate at MIT Sloan and an expert on international climate and energy policy, and is also a system dynamics modeler. He teaches systems thinking and climate policy at MIT Sloan, Stanford, and UNC-Chapel Hill. He lives with his family in Asheville, North Carolina. Without further ado, here is Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones, welcome to Climate.edu. Thanks for being on the show today.
Happy to be here, Richard. Thank you.
So I learned about En-ROADS, which we'll talk about, through a colleague, a peer who's also been involved with kind of focus on climate change and climate change work, and he really recommended this program and told me about it and told me that he had become a climate ambassador, which we can talk about what that is. But I didn't do it right away. I'm a over enthusiastic learner. Sometimes I sign up for webinars. I do this kind of things and don't, if I even start them, I don't finish them. I went through every module of this of the En-ROADS training, even the optional modules. It was really great. So I'd like to talk about that. But so I was really excited when you agreed to be on the show to not only talk about Inroads and Climate Interactive and these the organization that you helped found, but also the training component of it as well. So let's get started for those who maybe haven't heard of Climate Interactive or Inroads. Could you tell us a little bit about what it is? Kind of give it your overview of what this is and what it does.
Yeah, sure. Well, Climate Interactive is a non-for-profit think tank. We are 12 people around the world who use system dynamics modeling, along with our friends and collaborators over at MIT's Business School, the Sloan School of Management, to build these simulators, give them away for free to the world for education, but primarily for decision support for top decision makers in parliaments and Congress and business and civil society to really help them get on track towards the high priority climate actions. And we grew out of really going back to the early climate negotiations pulled together by the United Nations. When I was at MIT as a graduate student learning how to build a global simulation model, the negotiations had no way of determining if China peaked emissions in 2030 and if the US reduced 26 to 28% or whatever their pledge was. What would it do? There was no scoreboard. No one had any idea in the 90s if the Kyoto Protocol would help. And heading up to Copenhagen in 2009, they had no idea. And I realized that these negotiators needed a fast-running, accurate simulator to help figure out what to do and how much was needed. Keep score, you might say. And built a team to develop those models. State Department in the US and the Chinese government both weighed in on what it ought to include, and they used it in Copenhagen and then for the Paris Agreement to the two parties of China and the US to achieve the bilateral US-China agreement, where John Holdren and Jonathan Pershing and Todd Stern, all of these top US negotiators, really embraced this fast-running tool.
Was it built for that purpose? I mean, you recognize this need, obviously, but did you kind of design it around these negotiations? And
It was built for that purpose. And since then, what you've seen is iteration number 483, which eventually grew into this simulator En-ROADS, and it's EN-ROADS, and it now has solutions, and it's framed globally. It's not about country versus country. It is a global model that, as you know, and people can see, is more about what's the effect of carbon pricing and phasing out fossil fuels and energy efficiency and electrification and carbon removal and population, methane, F-gases, and on and on. So that's the world that we're now simulating, but with that same purpose of helping decision makers see what's needed to get us on track.
And it might be a good idea if you're listening, you're not familiar with this tool that we're talking about, En-ROADS, to go to the website and take a look at it. It's really easy to use. And the address is www.climateinteractive.org/En-ROADS, EN-ROADS, which I did a little, Drew, digging, and that stands for Energy Rapid Overview and Decision Support, which I was always curious.
Correct. That's
So that's interesting. I just assumed that the development of this, the kind of the history of this was, based, as you said, you identified some need for how do we make sense of all this data about climate and kind of what the impacts of policy and different actions might be, and that it kind of emerged into being used places. I didn't realize that it had kind of been designed around actual discussions around these. It was when you identified this need and started to think about with your background in systems thinking and modeling, Did you kind of see the roadmap for where it is now, or did you see beyond this use by the State Department and others? For this, how much has it evolved, and have you kind of learned and built this thing that's maybe a lot different than what you thought it might be when you first started?
Yeah. Yeah. Early on, we knew we wanted to get into the solution space is where it is now. And yet we knew that there was a set of decisions that were to be made that we really wanted to help with. And the setting of these pledges to the United Nations, particularly that period, 2008 to 2015 with the Paris Agreement, that seemed like a decision point that we could really influence. We always want to be in the room where it happens, informing actual decisions that are being made. And so that was the nature of it. And it really has shifted, I think, now into, hey, what is the role of carbon capture and storage? Could that help? Do we need carbon removal? And in what form? How much can electrification help? Are we going to phase down or out or transition away from fossil fuels? These are some of the big conversations that our kind of modeling can inform. And so we knew it would get here, but we're thrilled that it did. And we're happy to be in the middle of these kind of strategy conversations now at the national and business and state, province level.
How much has that changed from that initial engagement? Was it? Did you move into? I mean, it's really interesting because I think this, I guess my introduction to En-ROADS through this training that I completed, I saw it as a tool that's available to anyone, right? Which is true, right? Like, the
Right.
average Joe, average citizen like me can look and say, what is this stuff, and what are the impacts? What could it have? But there's also this higher level during the training I was in. I guess you were at the last COP talks, kind of doing a presentation there. So there's a really interesting spread of influence. But how much is that?
Yeah.
I guess how has that developed along with the tool? Was it more of a you set that kind of higher governmental decision making level and has percolated down to being this tool that you're kind of promoting for anyone to use?
Well, we always had two threads of, using it with top decision makers and training people around the world to use it with their top decision makers in all the countries of the world, because it is in 21 languages. So it really is trying to get two people to take to their decision makers. And in parallel, we've always kept it online and free and set up for educational use, because that is another commitment of ours. So they've always moved together. And in particular, because we have this principle, my thesis advisor and colleague, Professor John Sturman at MIT, who co-built the model with us, always said it best. He said, research shows that showing people research doesn't work.
Right.
Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. So we knew we couldn't just develop these models, make the PowerPoint slides that said, here's the answer, here's what we need to do. Country-wise, here's what we need to do. Solution-wise, with coal, oil, gas, and methane, and forests, et cetera, we had to give it away in a form that people could interact with and learn on their own terms. And frankly, to do that really well, we needed experimentation and engagement. And for John and me, early on, we just said, all right, let's make this do a game. Let's give the model away and watch people use it and interact with it. Because that's how you really, as a designer, come to understand, what do people need to learn? What are the mental models? We love thinking about it as, what is the map that anybody has in the middle of in their head about what is connected to what in the climate system? Where are those mental models insufficient? What do people not understand about what we need to do to address this challenge? And education was always a way to learn what those misunderstandings are, and those experiences would inform what we would bring to Congress. So when I had 30 members of the House of Representatives around a table, I did the same thing that I do with my students at UNC-Chapel Hill. I say it's a game. We got to get temperature down below 2 degrees, try to get to 1.5. Here we go. Let's try. And people experiment and come up with things, whether you're a member of Congress or you're a business school student in Chapel Hill.
I know you've done this quite a bit for, let's say, powerful decision makers. What are some of the impact that you've seen when a congressman or senator, a leader, has engaged with this tool? Tell us about some of those reactions or some of the maybe the aha moments that you've seen happen.
Yeah, it's been remarkable, particularly when we have the chance to introduce it to a Sheldon Whitehouse from the Democratic side and John Kerry, over to John Curtis, who is a Republican from Utah, who was quite engaged with the model. What they report is that they are much more open to changing their mind about what policies will have whatever effect that they would over time. And a lot of it is with them getting rid of magical thinking about oversized impact of various solutions. The ones that have been the most remarkable, where people have been the most willing to change their mind, is, would fusion or thorium fission, the invention of a new zero carbon energy source, would that just solve the climate problem? Or planting 1 trillion trees. And people think that these are the kinds of like Superman comes in and saves us kind of solutions. Whereas when you really model it, even when uncertainties are varied and you can change different things and be very optimistic, it really doesn't help nearly as much as people think. And so many of these politicians and other citizens and others report that they really had their mind changed about it. And then they use this. Tom Steyer, the former presidential candidate and businessman out in California, on the 1 trillion trees, just goes on and on. I saw him in New York, and he now he quotes us everywhere that we've changed his mind on that. And Mitt Romney on carbon pricing, he quotes us about the analysis we've done on the power of carbon pricing, for example.
How does this the En-ROADS simulator work? For folks who maybe haven't seen it, or it's a, we call it a dashboard. What are some of the things that it does if you go in and you're a policymaker or just an average person and you want to see the impacts? What do you do to see that?
Yeah, you'll see it as a dashboard. And of course, under the dashboard, the interface is a mathematical model of the climate, land, energy system. And what you'll see when you open up En-ROADS, or a student, and of course it's freely available for a student to go use, what you see is the goal over on the right of where temperature is headed if we do nothing. 3.3 degrees Celsius, you need to get it below 2. And then you're given the chance to change investment policy, action, or assumptions around whether you're going to shut down coal, tax oil, encourage renewable energy, encourage the storage of renewable energy, electricity, carbon capture and storage of coal, oil, and gas, carbon pricing, energy efficiency in the transportation system, like efficient vehicles and scooters and public transportation, electrification, so we can have a lot of Teslas and Nissan Leafs around the world, heat pumps of electrification in buildings and industry, insulation and other things that improve efficiency of buildings and industry, and then land system, food from animals and food waste and protection of forests and reduced forest degradation, methane in 3 different sectors: energy and waste and agriculture, and carbon removal, that these speculative ideas, maybe we'll have direct air capture or we'll stop tilling the soil as much and capture more carbon dioxide in soil, and planting some trees. So that's the big span. And then if you don't like the assumptions, you can change many of them.
Right.
Many debated parameters. How much will the temperature go up if we have a lot more carbon in the atmosphere? That's a number that climate modelers like us have to choose. And it could be higher, it could be lower. You can actually go in and change many of those assumptions. Those are the key features of what a person's going to see.
Yeah, and so I remember when I was first encountered it and was kind of playing around with it. It's fairly intuitive, on this kind of this dashboard level where you just say, hey, I want to crank up, the investment in renewable energy, or I want to, we're going to shut down, oil production, right? And you see the temperatures, is just one big output that you see that's fairly clear, and you can say, like, if we want to get down below 2 degrees, what does that do? And what was really interesting, it was a little dispiriting at first, because I think, like a lot of people, I came to it with my own personal pet, approaches that I thought, like you said, whether it's planting 1 billion trees, which sounds really great, right? But what you quickly find is, like, getting the temperature down can be pretty challenging. There is no silver bullet,
right?
Which seems important to mention, that systems thinking is a big part of this model and the approach that you use. How was that? How systems thinking? How did it kind of originate and become incorporated? Is it part of your kind of data modeling approach? How did it become such an important piece of this for solving this problem?
Yeah, this really points back to the roots of the modeling approach that we take. And so in formal mathematical, like the scholarly field that we come out of is system dynamics modeling, which was invented at MIT in the 1950s and was popularized and kind of generalized for a broader public as some of the ideas behind it and the perspective behind it and some of the mapping tools, called systems thinking. And my mentor in this field, and actually John Sterman's mentor, Dana Meadows and Dennis Meadows, who were two of the authors of The Limits to Growth, the Club of Rome work in the 1970s, did a lot of work in writing about this perspective of seeing the world as an interconnected whole, and a systems thinking perspective, as well as the work of embedding this into games, so you experience a complex system and you have a more visceral experience of making it work better. So you have the formal modeling field, you have this perspective of systems thinking, and when you build a mathematical model like this, there's so many interdependencies that the kind of the ways that different parts of the system are connected just kind of leap out at you, because you'll see all these mysteries. You'll say, why did the red line go down instead of up? And you learn that there are many more connections than you ever had imagined. And when you have that experience, we hope it improves your mental model, your image of the overall system. So that's the root in systems thinking.
Yeah, I remember one of those examples, I think, was, when you increase the number, let's say, the number of, or you decrease the number of, oil fuel-based cars, and move to EVs. There's often these weird dynamics where you make some kind of improvement or change, and then you see an increase in use, total use, because maybe things are cheaper because you're succeeding, and that increased use creates more carbon, right, and kind of zeroes out or negatively impacts that temperature change, which is a really helpful thing to see, because it looks like winning, right? It looks like, hey, we're impacting this policy, and we're decreasing the number of cars that use gas, and but we're not seeing the improvements, and here's why. And so I think that's always really interesting. And I also like you mentioned about changing the assumptions. It's like you can use the En-ROADS dashboard right out of the box, right, without any kind of, I mean, it's helpful to go through the training, but you can see it and use it. But you can also drill down each of the different, it's generally sliders where you go up or down, right?
Yeah.
And you can drill down and as you said, change assumptions or kind of look at, what's in there and kind of change these numbers and kind of really kind of drill down and customize it at a very kind of micro level, which I think is really interesting. But it also seems like it's just incredibly complex to to hold together and to update and to get your arm, as the designers, right, to get your arms around what must be just, such a complex amount of data. How challenging is that to kind of maintain the model on the dashboard?
Yeah. Challenging. I'd say it takes a team of really smart modeler engineers to build all of this and collaborators around the world who help. And of course, we stand on the shoulders of giants with the research that informs what we do. But it is a big project. We're 12 people. They're more on the MIT side. And we're now a $3 million a year fundraising machine that tries to keep the world informed about what's high leverage and low leverage. So it's a good bit of work and it's worth it.
So can you talk a little bit about some, I guess we'd call them use cases of En-ROADS? I just did I just hosted a panel for a conference, and one of the panelists had designed a lesson, or it was a subject to climate was the website, right? And she designed a lesson for her high school students using En-ROADS. And was
great.
Talking about that. Yeah. And so, it was interesting to see that in that context. But, I've used, I've done trainings for a local climate organization here that I work with. And I know of other folks who are using it in ways. But can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that...
For education, there are two main use cases. There is a kind of workshop, play with the model and learn things approach. And then there's a role play game that we have as well. And we've talked mostly about the first, which is like what we did with members of Congress. And on our website, there's something called the guided assignment, the En-ROADS guided assignment, which is basically homework that says, open up En-ROADS, watch this video to learn how it works, and play with it. Try to get temperature down below 2 degrees. And what did you learn? And then what did you learn about equity and about fairness and about what needs to be done and business implications? So just a lot of the questions you might ask afterwards. So that's the main use case. Play with the model, see what you learn. It's actually in the MIT Museum in that form. You can walk up to it and just play and learn. The other is what we designed, we've been iterating on for 20 years now, which is a role play game. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be back at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill at the Keenan Flagler Business School. We do the same at MIT. I do the same thing out at Stanford, where we say, I walk in with a coat and tie saying, I am Antonio Guterres. I am the Secretary General of the UN. This is an emergency climate summit where we've pulled together leaders from conventional energy. So Rex Tillerson, the former Exxon president, is there, and all the way to Greta Thunberg sitting on the floor with her climate activists. And we make students who tend more towards being an environmentalist, they have to play the oil executive, and the ones who are more wary of climate action play the activist. So you have people switch their role entirely, but it's also clean energy is there, and land, and the industry and commerce, China and India and the US and developing nations and island nations. So 8 or 10 total teams at this simulated summit. And I say, okay, here's a piece of paper, a letter from your powers back home, and you're now going to negotiate a pathway to getting well below 2 degrees. Go for it. And they make speeches and make proposals and fight with each other and disagree and agree and try to come up with a deal that will not annoy everybody too much and meet the goal. So it's a 2 hours or 3 hours of the most lively, spirited discussion that we ever see, and not all intellectual about models and technologies. It is from the heart, from the gut, students hashing it out and welcoming people who haven't thought about climate, don't love models, don't love technology and policy, but just know about justice and fairness and about people getting along and not getting along. And so it's you can hear my energy about it. It's the best way. It's called the Climate Action Simulation.
Yeah.
And it's all documented, and all the materials are free on the website. About 1,500 teachers, professors who have used it around the world over this last 20 years.
It's a lot of fun. I did it, I guess, a virtual version.
Oh, did you? That's great.
During the class. And, it was interesting in a number of ways, in that it was so, oftentimes when you're looking, at climate change, right in the face, right? It's not uplifting, right? It can be emotionally difficult, but this, the social aspect of this game, and the kind of interactions and the negotiating that was happening, it made it a lot of fun. You had the fate of the world in your hands, right? But it was all make believe, and a really good way to kind of, I thought, to make use of the model too, to say what can we really do. Now we're faced with these decision makers and these different camps and politics and things like that, and to see what kind of impacts that you can have, and you also, like as I mentioned before, you have to let go of some things maybe that you were really attached to in order to get to where you need to go. So you see that that use is popular generally, when it's being kind of used in education or by educators.
Oh my gosh,
is the workshop.
People love it. It takes more of an investment of time to get ready to do it, but the payoff is just huge. We've done some studies. The earlier version of it, called the World Climate, which is just with countries, 81% of participants emerged more likely to take action on climate after doing it, or that's what they reported. And we're doing some other studies of the impact. It can be transformational. I've been teaching people for 20 years now, and when I see former students and they remind me like something about our experience together, they never talk about an idea. They always talk about a game. They're like, that was, it just resonates so deeply with people. We're trying to find the funder who wants to turn it into a version that could be played on iPads and is more automated, so that the intro doesn't need to be a person making the speech like me or a teacher coming in, but everything could be built into a learning system. Yeah. And if we had that, it would spread so much more wildly, because you would need 15 minutes to get ready, not frankly 3 to, how many hours did you spend watching those videos, Richard, to learn the model? We got to avoid that, because that really limits the scale of.
Yeah, I would love to do the simulation. Again, I think that was really it was so exciting and a lot of fun. And when I think about presenting this myself, it seems like that would be a great mode. But then I start thinking about it and say, wow, there's a lot to do here. It's going to take a little bit of work. Yeah. I'm still going to do it, but I see your point. Well, that gets me to this, shifting into, I guess what you call the Climate Ambassador Program,
right?
Which is basically putting, you go out, Drew, you go out and talk to people in the Senate, and you go to a COP and things like that, and you present this model. But what you're also saying is, like, anybody can do this, take this training, become a climate ambassador, and then take the tool and do the game, or, do a workshop. And what was the, at what point did that piece emerge in, the work of Climate Interactive, where you saw that, we wanted to develop this training and put it in the hands of folks?
Yeah, it was told you about, the Paris Agreement and around that time, and we had the game. The first game was really kind of recreating the international dialogue around the United Nations Paris Agreement decision. And we would run the game, and John Sturman at MIT and we would iterate back and forth, and then our team would do it, and then realized, well, let's just put the slides online. Let's just put the position descriptions online. And we started noticing that people started running it, and they were kind of learning themselves how to do it and watching us and then going off and running it. And we realized that with the ambitions to really help see greenhouse gas emissions falling rapidly, that's the vision of Climate Interactive, we need to get out of the way of people using these materials themselves. And I say get out of the way is just like to not limit it by us, but start to share more and more. And we realized they need more training and more support. So during the pandemic, we shot 63, these are what you saw, 63 5 to 10 minute videos to teach in small chunks and with made 31 quizzes, this whole online curriculum for free to see if we started training people a little better, would they be able to do a good job of presenting the model, but importantly, explaining why the model does what it does, because that is really critical. We need people who are able to say why the model is behaving as it is.
Right.
Most black box models, most of the global models, don't do that. They share results. If you have a carbon price, then this is what happens to temperature. People say, well, why exactly? What happened? That's not part of what's offered. But we have a different purpose. We really want to land insights about systems thinking, about how the system behaves. And so we really committed ourselves to teaching people more about it. And we realize they can do a good job. And so we have had now 780 people, 84 countries, 21 languages go through the program and are now teachers, advocates, decision support consultants out there in China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, Germany, France, of course, all the usual spots of engaging others. And we call it the En-ROADS Climate Ambassador Program. And the training for it is under training, and it's free videos. You go through them and watch them and participate in the community.
And you can go through, is there always a live component, like a live meeting component, or can you?
Once a year, we have a live cohort that goes through, and every week there'll be a new set of videos to watch. I think that's the one you did. And then we all meet and we have live events. And anybody who's involved, like we do monthly workshops, 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. just for the world. And we'll get hundreds of people every time show up for those events to engage with us. But for the training, there is this one annual cohort. Okay.
So that must have been the one I did, because it did have that live component. It was great. And there's folks from all over the world. And like I said, I did it. I finished it, and I did it. I generally did the I guess the material before the live class, so I was always prepared too. I was surprised myself.
All right, Richard.
But yeah, it would seem like it's similar to the game, the simulation game. I have to say that the training was really engaging. Again, it did have that live component, but it seemed really based on some really kind of fundamental good teaching and learning components, with having kind of like small kind of interactive videos and activities, and then you had this kind of social component to it, and it I don't know, it as I said, I have done a lot of these, or have done a lot of these, and I thought it was really compelling and really, really well designed. What you've had close to 800 folks
Yeah.
go through this. What kind of impact do you think it's had? Is that something that you can see, that you can measure? Are these folks going out and changing minds similar to
Yeah,
what you've done in the
it's
past?
remarkable. We just had a story from a professor in Germany, Florian Kappmeyer, who has been doing a series of workshops for uh, major corporations in Germany. So he uses the German version.
Hmm.
And he just reported back that a major corporation that had been putting money into development of fusion as a major climate solution said that because of his interaction as facilitated by Florian, they decided to not do that, but
Wow.
instead work on things that keep coal, oil, and gas from being burned in the next 5 or 10 years, which of course is the priority. And
Yeah.
so he wrote back like, this isn't just like, oh, people showed up for my workshop or
Yeah.
listened and seemed to get it. No, they moved their money, and there will be
Wow.
CO2 not emitted into the atmosphere because of it. So it's
Wow.
remarkable to be part of uh, really actually having results in the world. And then there's the other side of this is just the scale of reach. We now have 800,000 people around the world who've used the
Wow.
model. So this is the students of those 800 and the other several thousand that we know of using it. And then probably the 10,000 facilitators and introducers and teachers who don't tell us what they're doing because it's just free and online, and we don't even ask for their email address. We just say it's
Yeah.
out there. So it's exciting to see when we get evidence of it. And I'm having the problem now of people running businesses using it, which is great, and we allow that.
Hmm.
But we notice pictures of their simulations, for example, in the back of in the picture, like, oh, that's actually our simulation.
Yeah.
It's getting used much more than we even know.
Wow. Uh, is there I know that there's as you said, you don't have to log in, you can start using it, but are there other ways that you could suggest or that you've heard of, or ideas that you might want to share about how a faculty member or even a student, listening now, or administrator, someone in higher ed, uh, might incorporate this tool in some way or
Yeah,
use it some way kind of institutionally or within that context?
yeah. The most accessible approach, like if I were a professor
Hmm.
who is teaching about climate and I heard this podcast, uh, what I would do is you go to the En-ROADS guided assignment, and there's a page there. Without learning anything about En-ROADS, you would just say to your students, okay, here's your homework tonight. Watch this 11-minute video. And it explains everything about En-ROADS software, the most basic level. And
Hmm.
then here's the guided assignment. And it's just going to say, make a scenario and think about it and write down the answers to these 8 questions. And come in the next week or next day and see what they found and what happened. And ideally, the teacher would get ahead of the students and at least do the exercise and perhaps read and watch some of these videos that we've made about what's going on. But at the least, it should prompt the conversation and move things along. So I would just say, have people dive in. And
Yeah.
when you do it, of course, we designed the interface to land some of the insights that you just mentioned, Richard. And we
Hmm.
think that anybody could open it up and get kind of the top 5. You mentioned the first one. There's no silver bullet. There's no one big thing we're searching for.
Hmm.
Instead, it takes the whole system. It takes the whole system to transform. And third, it's possible. Those students will find they'll click a lot of things and they will get temperature down to 1.8 degrees or 1.9. It won't be easy to implement all those policies, but they'll see what many people don't think, which is that it's still possible to bend this curve and limit warming to well below 2 degrees, as we all hope. And Jonathan Foley said it a couple weeks ago. I like this line. Uh, Now is better than new.
Hmm.
Now is better than new. What we can implement today, like I told you in that Germany example of policies that keep us from burning coal, oil, and gas today or in the next
Right.
5 years is better than in 40 years emissions reduction from a new commercially available diffused source of electricity. Now is better than new. And of course, the priority that they'll get is it's all about not burning coal, oil, and gas. Like that's the priorities. And reducing methane and protecting forests. There's our top five. So professors, teachers, give it to your students, give them this homework, have them watch the little video, and then see what they come up with and see if you can land those top five insights.
Okay, the guided assignment.
The guided assignment. The En-ROADS guided assignment. I should change it to be homework, shouldn't I? Should call it it's homework.
Don't call it homework.
No. Okay. We'll keep it guided assignment.
Yeah. And then if you're up for it, the simulation game, move towards that would be a fun thing too. Maybe this, I don't know, maybe this is not a fair question, Drew, but as this podcast is really kind of thinking about the role of higher education in this climate emergency, right? We see with this project, with En-ROADS and Climate Interactive, how higher ed can not only develop something like En-ROADS, which, as you said, has almost an outsized impact and has influenced world leaders and countries, from making bad decisions. And it's also a tool for education or educators, or that can be used in the classroom. But you also work in a higher ed context, right? That kind of institutional context. And you mentioned being at UNC.
Yeah.
What is your opinion? What do you see around, if you can, like with your experience with higher ed institutions and the response of these institutions or lack of response or to what we're facing as institutions?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm heavily influenced by all my time at MIT and tracking what's been going on there. I don't know if you've seen this last couple of months, there's been a series of pretty major announcements of the MIT Climate Project, a multi-million dollar, multi-tens of million dollar investment by the university in climate action. And then just in the last couple of days, the MIT Sloan Climate Policy Center. And what I love about what they're doing is that it is action oriented, it is real world oriented, and bringing students into the world to go do things and learn about what's going on the ground with policy and technology and social dynamics and all of that, and bringing people from that world of policy into the academy. I really buy into, and I'm not just, this is what I do. I like the Indiana Jones world of teaching. I always loved the scene where he's in his tweed coat, he's talking about his adventures in the world, and then he goes and has adventures in the world. That's my idea of what the future ought to be in education, is more people who are engaged in applying the ideas that are being studied. Now, when they're being studied, it's not just case studies of application. You've got to get into the theory and the economics and science and biogeochemistry of what underlies the insights that are being developed and the analysis that was used to lead to the actions that are being taken in the real world. I love theory, and yet it is theory and practice that we need. And so my encouragement to the academy is to engage more with the real world, bring people in and send the students out. It's happening all over. We've seen it. It's beautiful. And that's what we need more of.
Thank you. So speaking of kind of things that lie ahead. What lies ahead for En-ROADS, or what's next for En-ROADS or for Climate Interactive? Where you want to get to for some of the challenges we face.
Yeah, I love thinking about all of this. This is what's exciting. And when I go on my fundraising tours of the world, this is what I end up talking about. In fact, we just launched yesterday a training course. It's going to be taught out in the Bay Area in May, where people sit down for 2 days just to learn the model. And I'll go raise money in Silicon Valley for the following. And the main thing is that we need top decision makers, particularly outside of the US and Europe, to have access to these cutting edge tools, to people who know how to engage with the tools, and to these key insights that separate high priority action from low. How do we get to China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, all these places where future emissions are? 83% of future emissions. If we don't do much, 83% is going to come from those rapidly emerging countries. Top leaders in those countries need analysis to drive the best solutions they can come up with. So that goes back to this program of empowering people around the world. And so that's number one. It's just getting these tools to those folks. The tools need to be better and better because there are more and more possibly distracting policies that are getting proposed, where I'm concerned about too much leaning on, say, carbon removal or waiting for a future technology to save us. So we're really trying to improve the model in a lot of those new areas. We're trying to make the future more vivid with maps on impacts of heat and precipitation, of ski days in ski country, of inequities around the world and prices of energy. What are all these impacts that are out there that we could understand a lot better? The finance world we're getting to, because it's the banks and financial institutions that are giving the money to the polluters. And we want to really help them have the right tools to see what's needed in order to get to the results that we really want. Those are some of the really big areas that we dream about investing in more.
So is that more like getting the penetration of En-ROADS and its use in these countries and different sectors, and
That's
not
it.
necessarily new features?
Well, that last list of things to improve in the model would be new features we don't have today. Yeah.
All right.
So there's a technological improvement thread, and then there's the engagement of the world thread.
Wow. Well, Drew, I want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for your work on En-ROADS and being out there, traveling around the globe, helping people get a deeper understanding of the climate impacts and, policy solutions and, more near-term positive impacts on climate. And thanks for your time, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, Richard, thank you for your leadership about climate in the education space. We need it so much, and just appreciating what you're doing.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Climate.edu is written by me, Richard Sebastian. The theme music is by Serge Quadrado. You'll find a link to Serge's free music archive page in the show notes, where you can also find a guest bio, transcripts, and additional links and resources. You can also go to the show website at climate.edu.com. Yes, that's right. The word climate, DOTEDU.com, where you'll find other episodes of climate.edu, get news and updates related to climate change in higher ed, or to get in touch with me. If you like this episode, make my day by subscribing. Thanks for listening. See you next time.